On a crisp Thursday morning, as the town of Riverstone bustled through another ordinary day, a man stepped through the doors of the First National Bank. No one knew him. No one remembered him. No one even noticed him. At first, he was dressed simply. A navy blue jacket, dark slacks, polished shoes that clicked softly on the tile floor. He carried a small black briefcase. Nothing unusual. His movements were casual, almost practiced, blending in with the quiet hum of the bank. Security footage would later show him glancing at the clock above the entrance. Just once, 10:42 a.m. He didn't head for a teller. He didn't approach a loan officer. He simply took a seat in the lobby, as if waiting for someone minutes past. 10:42 a.m. The first glitch occurred. The fire alarm buzzed once, then stopped. The security feed blinked out for exactly 3.4 seconds. No one inside the bank seemed to notice. No one except him. By the time the cameras came back online, he was gone. No goodbyes, no transaction, no record of his visit. The man who had walked into the bank that morning left behind no fingerprints, no ID, not even a clear image. And by the time anyone realized what happened, it was already too late. Welcome to Solved Cases. Before we dive into this story, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Riverstone was the kind of town where nothing ever really happened. Tucked between rolling hills and endless stretches of farmland, it was a place where front doors stayed unlocked, neighbors borrowed sugar without asking, and children rode their bikes until sunset without a second thought. The heart of Riverstone was its main street, a single, winding road lined with diners, antique shops, a faded movie theater, and the First National Bank. It wasn't the biggest bank. It wasn't the newest. But it was steady, like everything else here. Generations of families had trusted the First National with their savings, their mortgages, their safe deposit boxes. It wasn't just a place to cash a paycheck. It was a symbol of security, of tradition, of trust. Crime, when it happened at all, was petty. A teenager sneaking a candy bar, or a neighbor's lawnmower mysteriously switching yards after a long night. Serious crime, real crime, that belonged to the headlines of distant cities, not Riverstone. The local police department consisted of exactly 6 officers. Their biggest worries were the 4th of July parade getting too loud, or chasing a stray cow back into a pasture. In Riverstone, people didn't look over their shoulders. They didn't second-guess a stranger's smile. They believed, perhaps foolishly, that bad things happened somewhere else. But on that quiet Thursday morning, Riverstone's sense of safety, the invisible shield it had worn for decades, was pierced. And it all started with a man no one could remember. He blended in. No loud footsteps. No exaggerated gestures. At first glance, he could have been any other customer. A quiet businessman on a break from a long road trip. A visitor passing through Riverstone on his way to somewhere else. But there was something off. Something no one could quite place. He stood at about 6 feet tall. Dark hair, slightly too neat, like he'd just stepped out of catalog. His eyes, cold yet calculating, scanning everything and nothing all at once. He didn't rush. He didn't fidget. In fact, he looked almost bored, as though he'd done this 1,000 times before. He walked with a slow, deliberate stride, measured, like a man who knows exactly where he's going, and who knows he has time. He stopped in the middle of the lobby, just a few feet from the coffee station, just beside the row of chairs. He paused. For a moment, his hand hovered near his briefcase. Then, with no rush, he sat down and waited. Nothing about him seemed suspicious, at least not anyone watching. He didn't look out of place. But something about the way he sat, something about the way he waited, made everyone else in the bank uncomfortable in ways they couldn't explain. His movements were too smooth, too calculated, his gaze too steady. And the way he glanced at the clock, it was as though he was waiting for something. Someone, but nobody in Riverstone knew who. His expression never changed. His demeanor never wavered. To the casual observer, he was just another customer, waiting for a turn, for a call, for something. But to the trained eye, there was one detail that stood out, something that didn't belong. It wasn't the way he walked. It wasn't his clothes. It was the stillness, the way he didn't fit in with the natural flow of the bank. And though no one could have known it at the time, that stillness was a calm before a storm. And then something strange happened. The fire alarm flickered. A short, sharp buzz, followed by silence. The room didn't react. But the man, he looked up. His gaze lingered just a moment longer than it should have. A moment that felt too intentional. No one realized it then. But it would be the last time anyone saw him before everything changed. At exactly 10:49 a.m., the first flicker passed the bank. So brief, so ordinary, that no one paid any mind. The fire alarm gave a sudden, stuttering chirp. One sharp buzz and silence. A few customers glanced up lazily from their phones and paperwork. A teller behind the counter flinched, her hand pausing mid-stamp. But when nothing else happened, she shook her head and laughed it off under her breath. Probably a glitch. Old wiring. It happens sometimes. 2 minutes later, the lights overhead flickered. A half-second of darkness, barely enough to register. A baby in a stroller whimpered. The mother rocked him back to sleep without lifting her eyes from her banking app. Behind the scenes, the Wi-Fi signal, always reliable, always strong, dipped for the first time in months. The bank manager's computer lagged for 3 whole seconds, freezing her spreadsheet mid-entry before snapping back to life. She frowned, tapped her keyboard, and told herself she needed to remind IT to check the servers. In the surveillance room upstairs, the security monitors hiccuped. 3.4 seconds of static. Then the screens returned, calm, undisturbed. The guard on duty, halfway through a sandwich, didn't even look up. The glitches came so subtly, so harmlessly, that the morning kept flowing without a ripple. Deposits processed. Conversations murmured. Coffee machines hissed out fresh brews for waiting customers. Everything appeared normal. But if anyone had been paying closer attention, really paying attention, they might have noticed a pattern. Each flicker came just after the man shifted positions. When he crossed his legs, when he reached into his coat, when he adjusted his briefcase on the floor. Small, casual movements, each coinciding, almost exactly, with a glitch somewhere in the building. At 10:53 a.m., as he stood up and walked calmly toward the lobby exit, the lights flickered one final time. A longer flicker this time, enough that a teller made a face, tapping her monitor twice to wake it up. The moment a man's hand brushed against the heavy glass doors, the security cameras blinked again. This time longer. 5 seconds of static swallowed the entire lobby. When the screens returned, the man was gone. There was no footage of him leaving. No footage of him stepping onto the sidewalk or blending into the crowd. 1 second he was standing there, the next, nothing. Across the bank, a slow, creeping unease settled into the air, though no one could say why. The fire alarm gave one final reluctant buzz before falling permanently silent. The Wi-Fi signal wavered for a moment, then returned to half-strength. Business carried on. Checks were cashed. Balances were updated. Life moved forward in Riverstone, the way it always had. But something had shifted, something unseen. And by the time anyone realized what it was, the man was already far, far beyond their reach. It wasn't until the next morning that anyone noticed something was wrong. The first hint came from Mrs. Patterson, the bank manager, when she arrived to unlock the doors. She spotted it immediately, a slight gap in the frame of the vault room, something no one else would have seen unless they were looking for it. The door was supposed to seal tight, locking with a mechanical finality every night. Now, it hung just slightly ajar. Her stomach tightened. At first, she told herself it was a mistake. Maybe the night crew hadn't locked it properly. Maybe the ancient locking system had finally failed. She pushed the door open with the edge of her clipboard, heart pounding louder than she cared to admit. Inside, the vault was eerily silent. The rows of safe deposit boxes gleamed under fluorescent lights, neat and untouched. Almost. Halfway down the second row, several boxes hung open. Their tiny steel doors gaped like broken mouths, contents gone. Empty velvet pouches littered the floor. Dusty outlines where documents and jewelry had once rested were all that remained. Mrs. Patterson stumbled backward, slamming into a filing cabinet with a metallic thud that echoed through the vault. Within minutes, the police were called. Officers arrived in waves, pushing to the bank's double doors with urgent footsteps, cordoning off the lobby with bright yellow tape. Curious customers and early morning joggers gathered on the sidewalks, murmuring, pointing, snapping photos with their phones. Inside, chaos brewed. Detectives moved carefully through the vault, counting the open boxes. 11 in total. Bonds, gone. Family heirlooms, gone. Stacks of private documents, deeds, and untraceable bearer bonds vanished without a trace. When they pulled up the security footage to search for any sign of the intruder, the story grew stranger still. There was no footage of a break-in, no forced entry, no masked figure caught under the grainy glow of the cameras, and most unnervingly, no record of the man from the day before. The camera feed showed every customer who had entered and exited on Thursday. Every face, every motion, except his. There was a perfect gap in the footage, a blank space where time should have been. At 10:53 a.m., the lobby camera blinked into static for 5 full seconds. When the image returned, the man and the briefcase were gone. Mrs. Patterson, pale and shaking, kept insisting she had seen him. Several tellers nodded, backing her up. Customers in line remembered a man in a dark jacket, sitting quietly by the coffee station. They remembered his briefcase, his cold, polite stare. But there was no digital evidence, no fingerprints, no ID badge, no transaction, no trace. It was as if he had never been there at all. And as investigators fanned out across Riverstone, knocking on doors and questioning every soul who had stepped into the bank that day, one thing became horrifyingly clear. The man who walked into First National Bank hadn't just stolen from the vault. He had stolen from reality itself. Detective Alan Reeves had been with the Riverstone Police Department for 17 years, and in all that time, he'd never seen anything like this. The evidence board in the cramped second-floor office looked barren. No suspects, no leads, just blurry screenshots pulled from the bank's static-filled security cameras, showing little more than a tall figure with a blurred face and a dark jacket. It wasn't just the missing footage. Even the frames there were wrong, distorted, warped at the edges, as if the very air around the man resisted being captured. No fingerprints had been found inside the vault or on the deposit boxes, or anywhere he might have touched. The briefcase he carried, whatever was inside it, had left no traces. The handles on the doors, the chairs he sat in, even the arm of the couch where he briefly rested his hand, all wiped clean. Forensics dusted everything twice, desperate for something, anything, but the swabs came back blank. No DNA, no hair, no fibers. It was as if he hadn't existed. The officers pulled footage from nearby businesses, the diner across the street, the pharmacy on the corner, even the ATM across the way. But somehow, impossibly, the man didn't appear in any of them. Pedestrians came and went. Delivery trucks rumbled by. But there was no sign of a man in a dark jacket, carrying a briefcase. Detective Reeves stood at the front of the room, staring at the board with arms crossed, jaw set tight. He hated calling for outside help. Riverstone prided itself on being self-reliant. They handled break-ins, bar fights, missing dogs, the usual small-town fare. But this was something else entirely. By noon, the decision was made. Reeves picked up the phone with a heavy sigh and dialed the bureau. 2 agents from the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group arrived the next morning. Their suits were sharp. Their faces were sharper. Agent Linda Hale, cool and methodical. Agent Marcus Dunn, tall, silent, eyes always moving. They asked their questions in low, even voices. They watched the glitchy footage over and over, scribbling notes, rewinding, pausing, rewinding again. Their conclusion was immediate and chilling. Whoever the man was, he had professional-level skills, and possibly access to technology far beyond anything Riverstone was equipped to handle. Agent Hale ordered a full sweep of the bank. Electronic forensics teams combed through the network logs and security systems. They found anomalies, small digital fingerprints suggesting remote access, Disturbances in the camera feeds that lined up precisely with the man's movements inside the building. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, planned. The FBI quickly expanded the search radius, requesting footage from nearby highways, gas stations, and traffic cameras up to 50 miles away. But the results were always the same. Static gaps, blurry frames, missing minutes. Detective Reeves watched his town transform in the span of 2 days. Riverstone's quiet streets filled with unmarked vans and men in dark windbreakers. FBI agents canvassed local shops and questioned townsfolk who had nothing more to offer than shrugs and nervous glances. They weren't just chasing a thief anymore. They were chasing a ghost. And somewhere, out there beyond Riverstone's tree-lined roads and crumbling brick buildings, the man with no name, no face, and no past had already disappeared, carrying secrets worth millions, and something else no one could yet explain. By the end of the week, Riverstone was buzzing with speculation. Everyone had a theory. Everyone knew someone who knew something. In diners, hardware stores, and church basements, whispers passed faster than wildfire across dry fields. Some said he had to be a professional, a world-class thief trained in the art of disappearing. They pointed to the precision of the operation, the way he left no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace. No amateur could pull off a job like that without a single misstep. He must have spent months, maybe years, planning the heist. Others insisted he was ex-military, or even worse, a rogue spy, maybe a black ops agent gone off the grid, using classified technology to hack and scramble the bank systems. They cited the strange technical failures, the camera blackouts, the Wi-Fi flickers. Normal thieves didn't carry equipment that could fry electronics without anyone noticing. A few townsfolk took it even further. They whispered that he wasn't just rogue. He was sent by someone. A warning, a test, a message from powerful forces that operated far beyond Riverstone's quiet streets. Some spoke of secret government experiments, shadow organizations, intelligence wars fought silently just beneath everyday life. At the other end of the spectrum were simpler theories. Some believed the man was a disgruntled former employee, someone who once worked at the bank, someone who knew the system's weaknesses from the inside. Maybe he'd watched for years, biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back at the institution that wronged him. Others thought he was just desperate, maybe a genius on the edge, a man with nothing left to lose. Someone who snapped after being crushed by debt, divorce, or disgrace, deciding to steal everything he could before vanishing into oblivion. But then there were the darker, stranger theories, the ones spoken about only in hushed voices when the sun dipped low. Some claimed the man wasn't human at all, an entity, a ghost, a manifestation of something that didn't belong in this world. They pointed to the impossible camera glitches, the missing footprints outside the bank, the way witnesses struggled to recall the exact details of his face. Descriptions were always just slightly wrong. His hair too dark, too light, his jacket black, or was it gray? His briefcase leather, or was it plastic? Even those who swore they saw him up close couldn't seem to agree, like a memory slipping through their fingers. And then there were the reports, strange ones, of similar incidents in other towns. Small, isolated places hundreds of miles apart. Banks losing small fortunes under mysterious circumstances. Cameras failing. Witnesses describing a polite, quiet man with a forgettable face. The FBI wasn't sharing much. But those who paid attention saw the signs. Extra agents arriving from out of state, low-flying helicopters after dark, unmarked trucks rolling in and out of town at odd hours. Whatever they thought they were dealing with, it wasn't simple. It wasn't ordinary. And deep down, the people of Riverstone knew the truth they couldn't say out loud. They weren't just looking for a criminal. They were staring into the face of something they didn't understand. And it was still out there, watching, waiting, hidden in plain sight. The deeper the investigators dug, the clearer one thing became. The man had planned everything down to the smallest detail. At first, it seemed like there were no clues at all. No fingerprints. No fibers. No footprints. But hidden in the layers of emptiness, tiny fractures in the perfect crime began to appear, the faintest echoes of his presence. The first clue was found in the conference room adjacent to the main lobby, where the man had sat for a few minutes pretending to fill out loan paperwork. On the table, among a stack of ordinary pens, investigators found one that didn't belong. Sleek and matte black, it looked almost identical to the others at a glance. But closer inspection revealed something strange. It wasn't a pen. Inside the casing was a tiny device, no larger than a thumb, designed to emit a low-frequency signal capable of scrambling nearby electronics. A portable jammer. Crude but effective, enough to disrupt Wi-Fi routers, security cameras, even digital locks, for just a few critical seconds. The device was clean. No fingerprints, no identifying marks, no serial number. Homemade, but built by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. The second clue came from the deposit forms. Somehow, amidst the panic and confusion, no one had noticed that the man had filled out paperwork, blank deposit slips neatly placed into a folder under the counter. But every slip he touched bore the same thing. Perfect handwriting, looping and mechanical, too uniform to be natural. It was a detail designed to mislead. Forensic handwriting experts determined the writing was produced by a machine, likely a portable device that replicated pen strokes to mimic human movement. Another layer of misdirection, another dead-end trail. Yet, there was something even stranger. On one of the forms, buried in the fine print at the bottom, an investigator found a tiny smudge, almost invisible, that, when analyzed, revealed a microscopic scrap of paper fiber not produced by any local mill. Specialized paper, military grade, often used for classified documents because it could resist fire and water. Why would a bank customer have access to that? The final piece came from a subtle scratch on the inside of the vault door, invisible to the naked eye, but under UV light. It appeared a faint arc, almost like a tool mark, suggesting that the lock hadn't been hacked digitally. It had been opened manually, picked, which meant the man hadn't needed to break the bank's software at all. He simply understood the mechanical weaknesses, bypassing layers of modern security with old-school, hands-on expertise. Like a master locksmith or someone trained to think like one, each clue, by itself, meant little. Together, they painted a chilling picture. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It wasn't random. The man who walked into First National Bank had been prepared for everything. The cameras, the security, the staff, even the FBI. He had anticipated every step they would take afterward and left them chasing ghosts. And still, after all the dust and sweat and late nights, one thing remained maddeningly true. They were no closer to knowing his name, no closer to understanding his motives, no closer to finding him. Only one thing was certain. Whoever he was, he hadn't made a single move without thinking 5 moves ahead. And somewhere, maybe, he was already planning his next. At first, it was just whispered conversations, hushed voices behind church pews, quick glances exchanged across diner counters. Riverstone wasn't the kind of place where you locked your doors during the day. Now, people checked twice. Some bolted windows that hadn't been touched in years. Parents kept their kids closer. Shopkeepers watched strangers more carefully. Even the usual Friday night gatherings at Molly's Tavern thinned out, replaced by a heavy, lingering unease. Fear had settled over the town like a fog, invisible but everywhere. In the absence of answers, stories grew wild. Some swore they'd seen strange cars park along the old highway the night before the robbery. Others claimed the man had been spotted at the gas station on Route 12 weeks earlier, casing the town. A few whispered darker things, that maybe he hadn't come for the money at all. Maybe Riverstone had been chosen for another reason, something the townsfolk weren't meant to understand. Rumors bred faster online. Within days, Riverstone's mystery had escaped its borders and flooded forums, message boards, and social media groups dedicated to unsolved crimes. Reddit threads exploded with theories. Some users dissected the blurry CCTV frames, enhancing and sharpening images until faces distorted beyond recognition. Others mapped every known bank heist across the country, drawing frantic lines and arrows, trying to find a pattern that didn't exist. One amateur sleuth claimed the man's body language matched that of a disgraced CIA operative from a decade earlier. Another insisted the fire alarm glitch was proof of experimental government tech, part of a cover-up far bigger than Riverstone. YouTube channels cropped up overnight with titles like The Ghost of Riverstone and The Man Who Never Was, racking up thousands of views from curious strangers who had never set foot in the quiet town. For Riverstone's residents, it felt like the world was peering in through a magnifying glass. Not a help, but to watch and wonder, like spectators at a slow-moving tragedy. The local mayor held a press conference, standing stiffly at the steps of Town Hall under a sweltering afternoon sun. He promised transparency, promised cooperation with the FBI, promised they would catch whoever was responsible. But his voice trembled, and the people heard it. Insurance companies began quietly sending letters to account holders at the First National Bank, assuring them their assets were protected, while also suggesting they might want to relocate to more secure facilities. A few families, those who could afford it, packed up and moved away entirely, not because of the stolen money, because of what the theft represented. If someone could waltz into their bank, the very heart of their safe little town, and vanish without a trace, then maybe Riverstone wasn't safe after all. Maybe it never had been. Underneath it all, a deeper question spread, unspoken but understood. If he could do this, what else could he do? And would he ever come back? Months passed. The leaves turned from green to gold to brown. Winter laid a heavy stillness over Riverstone. The investigation slowed and then quietly stopped. No suspect was ever named. No arrest was ever made. The FBI packed up their mobile units. The unmarked trucks disappeared. The media moved on, chasing the next story. Riverstone was left with its silence and its questions. The First National Bank repaired the vault door. They upgraded the cameras, replaced the locks, strengthened the firewalls. But none of it mattered, because the truth was they hadn't lost to a broken lock or a faulty server. They had lost to something far more dangerous, a mind that had been 10 steps ahead before they even knew they worked in a game. People tried to move on. The diner reopened at full hours. Children returned to playing in the park. New families moved into the old white houses along Main Street. But every so often, someone would glance over their shoulder at a stranger passing through town and wonder, was it him? Was he watching? Across the country, strange whispers continued. A small credit union in Nebraska reporting a glitchy alarm system and missing bonds. A rural bank in Oregon losing $500,000 overnight with no sign of forced entry. A sleepy coastal town in Maine, its only bank manager waking up to find the vault doors wide open and empty. Different states, different towns, different methods, but always the same chilling result. No trace, no suspects, no answers. Some began to wonder if Riverstone had been the first. Others feared it had only been a test, a dry run for something bigger, something still to come. And somewhere out there, perhaps in a crowded airport or a quiet cafe or a bustling downtown street, a man with a forgettable face might be sitting calmly, reading a newspaper, sipping a cup of black coffee, already planning his next move, watching, waiting, smiling, because the perfect crime was never about stealing money. It was about disappearing into the world so completely that not even the ghosts could find you. And Riverstone, for all its quiet charm and safe streets, would never again forget what it learned that year. Monsters don't always break down your door. Sometimes they walk right through it and tip their hat on the way out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. See you on the next episode.